Hey Now! It's the Hey Now Howard podcast, first and only podcast dedicated to the king of all media, Howard Stern, and all things Howard Stern Show. My name is Daniel Coyne.
And I'm Tyler Cortad. Today we're going to be talking about Donald Trump on the Howard Stern Show.
This is Beto. He's as bad as can. He knows he's the best. This is Beto. He's as bad as can. He knows he's the best. This is Beto.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you guys had a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, whatever you're supposed to say. Happy New Year. We're back. It's a new year. New Hey Now Howard podcast 2020. Very excited about some topics that we have in store for you guys, all 10 of you. But yeah, we're excited for it.
That's right. New decade. And is this the decade that we see Howard Stern retire? Probably, or else he's going to die while recording the show.
Like Don Imus. Don Imus died while we were away.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
So I bet you Howard's thinking that now. He's like, oh, do I want to go out? I mean, Don Imus retired and then died like 2 years later. It's like, I know Howard doesn't want that.
Yeah, you see that a lot.
I know.
You know, Joe Paterno.
Yeah, you got
See
nothing
these
to
people
do.
that just do a job for 60 years.
Joe Paterno had some other outside factors.
Yeah, I think he even had some other stress in his life for some reason.
But then, tell everybody where you can find us.
Oh, you can find us in Los Angeles, California. If you want to come to one of our live tapings, we haven't had anyone come by. Tyler's grandma came by the one episode. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
We're in Hollywood if you want to swing by. If not, check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcast and YouTube.
Awesome.
Like, subscribe, comment, tell your mistress, tell everyone you know. Come on by. I was looking at our analytics, and it's going to surprise a ton of you. We don't have billions of hits, but we actually have hits from like Japan, Germany, Hungary, Australia.
That's so crazy.
Like, did they have a typo? How the fuck did they find us?
Did they even listen to Howard? Do they know who Howard is?
Had to have been an accident.
Dan's
I'm guessing that was like the only podcast available in Hungary.
Yeah, right?
We're good to go.
Dan's huge in Hungary. That's Hungary and Japan are that's his market.
Erecting a statue of me
Yeah.
saying.
I've yet to break Europe. So, but yeah, we're happy to be back. I think we have a cool episode for you guys today. It's a little bit about Donald Trump, but we're going to be focusing a lot on just Howard's influence on politics and how Trump relates to all of that, because obviously he's our president. And he was a huge guest on the Stern Show for many, many years. Howard wrote about it in his book, has probably 5 or 6 chapters dedicated to Donald Trump. So, his influence, Howard's influence on Donald and vice versa is apparent. So we thought it'd be great to just do a whole episode on that and kind of veer off into a little bit of Howard's influence on politics in general.
Yeah, absolutely. We're also going to cover his Hillary Clinton interview recently that came in late 2019, and also his run for governor of New York in 1994.
Speaking of that, yeah, he doesn't talk about that much, but the one thing that always sticks out is his platform when he had 2 things. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, one of them was to help fill all the potholes in New York because he couldn't stand all the potholes. He was going to fill them with the crispy remains.
That's the best part.
The crispy remains of all the people that were sent to the death penalty.
That's right. Well, that was one of his steps, is reinstate the death penalty.
Oh, that was it.
And then that in turn would help fill the
Use
potholes.
the crispy remains to fill the potholes. I mean, people took him seriously, and that's the craziest thing.
He was leading in all the polls.
He started leading in the polls. Who was it? It was Cuomo and Pataki.
Cuomo, yeah, absolutely.
Cuomo and Pataki in 94. I mean, he talks about it now. He started to run as a goof, and said that was his platform, and started going to these rallies and people started showing up. Next thing you know, it's showing up in the polls that he's starting to lead. How fucking scary would that be if you don't really want to be governor and you start winning? And he relates to Donald Trump and the president.
I was going to say, it's kind of like similar
that.
situation. I've
Exactly,
heard
and that's how that's pretty much what he says about Donald when he started running in 2016. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure Howard got freaked out and he associates his feelings towards it and pretty much projects those onto Donald. But yeah, I'm sure that he just kind of got freaked the fuck out that he was actually winning and could potentially be the governor of New York when he has no qualifications whatsoever to be governor of New York
Right.
or governor of anything. So
yeah, I mean, he kind of had the vision before it played out in that 2016 of an entertainer with a huge audience that has a big reach and influence, and all of a sudden people kind of like his no-nonsense talk. And
Right.
Years later, we saw that play out on the grand stage.
Oh, yeah.
Also, just to finish that thought, his other ticket items were limiting road work to night shifts and removing highway tolls to improve traffic. So I think those are actual things that New Yorkers can get behind. We live in Los Angeles. We know
Right.
about traffic.
Yeah, we know about traffic. Not so much tolls, but yeah, anything that can alleviate some of that traffic would be, get all the Los Angeles.
Right. Leading candidate.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually doing a little bit of research before we did this, and I was trying to find, because I know that he had to take out political ads on the radio, and I was trying to find some of them. It's crazy. You can't find a single one. And I didn't look that hard. But it was weird because I did find a couple links, and every time I would click on the link, it would go to YouTube, and it was removed. So I don't know. I mean, there's only, you can only remove it if, you have some sort of stake in that. So I'm trying to figure out why that would have been removed. I couldn't have been that dirty because it was on the radio. But I did see an article from '94 saying about how Howard Stern takes out raunchy ad for his race. And so I was trying to just hear that and kind of see what that was, but I couldn't find it at all. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think at some point Howard definitely did not him himself, but hired someone to do like a sweep of YouTube, because you will see a lot of content taken down,
Right.
or even off of YouTube on like a third-party site. You'll see, even when I was doing research on all these Trump interviews, a lot of the audio has been taken down. And actually, the person who posted the website was talking about how Sirius, leading up to the election, made it an effort to wipe out, because he doesn't really replay a lot of the Trump stuff. And I think he's even said on air that he purposely wants to stay away from that.
I wonder why, though.
It's kind of interesting of how...
But then he wrote about him in his book about the things he wanted to... You know what I mean? So it's kind of like editing his own interviews to let you listen to whatever parts he wanted you to hear.
Yeah, sure.
So, and don't you think that probably has some sort of political, motivation?
Reasoning.
Yeah, exactly. So, I wonder what that's about. But
another thing, before we finish this topic, another thing that Howard said that got him out of the race, I'm sure he freaked out on being underqualified, but also it came to the point where he was so far in the race that he'd have to release his tax information, his income information,
Right.
and he's always shied away from that. Even now, as callers call in, and even if they make an offhand remark or a guest even says, well, I mean, geez, I don't have Howard Stern money, he instantly foo-foos it. I think he just wants to be the everyday man. He wants to be, I started on the radio making $100 a week. And I think he still wants to maintain that image. So the last thing he wanted was, which we see it again with Trump. He's never released his financial information.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of similarities between the two.
I was wondering, because did he really? I mean, was that just his excuse to the public of why he didn't want to do it? Because in '94, I mean, yeah, he was making a shit ton of money, more than anybody else on the radio, but it's not like he was making serious money at the time. So it was, but I guess he's just always been that way. He talks about that story with his dad. His dad always taught him, don't talk about money in front of people, or your own money or your own finances in front of people. So I guess it just kind of.
I was actually perusing some of the Reddit trolls recently, and
don't get lost in that rabbit hole, man.
Exactly. And someone had posted that you'll hear Howard sometimes talk about how he lived amongst monks for a year and barely paid any money, and it was quiet hours after 8 p.m. or something. You weren't allowed to talk. And he loved it. And he said, I got a lot of rest and I recharged my batteries for the next show. But what he doesn't talk about is that complex is actually this huge estate, multi-million dollar estate in New York.
Is it?
So someone in Reddit was like, oh, here's Howard's really rough beginnings that he always talks about. And he was living in this insane mansion.
No shit, I didn't know that. I always just assumed it was.
They still said the rules did apply, and there were monks, and it was all through TM, his meditation.
Right.
So I guess this is a center of it.
Gotcha.
So that's how he got hooked up there.
Sure. And TM's kind of known as, the I don't want to say elitist version of meditation, because you definitely have to pay to get taught.
It's pretty expensive, right?
It's fucking expensive. I mean, I started doing it a couple years ago, and I didn't even have the money. It was $700. So it was probably more than that even.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of money. I mean, I do think it's worth it. It became worth it after I started doing it, and I recommend it. But yeah, I honestly don't think you need to pay that. I didn't need to pay somebody to teach me that. I mean, if somebody knew how to do it can teach somebody for free. I mean, what you're paying for, and maybe this goes into why Howard did that sort of thing, is once you're in that little community, everything else is free. Like I'm sure, like that, he didn't have to pay. Right, he didn't have to pay for anything, because they do offer a lot of services like that, where it's like once you pay that, you're kind of in. You can attend all these events, and
It's like a membership.
yeah, it's like a retreat thing, and it's like a lifetime thing. So once you pay it, you're in. So that's kind of the selling point. But yeah, I could see how people can view that as like, I'm not joining that fucking cult, especially if you're going to a giant mansion like that and not talking. But that's crazy. I didn't know that. I would just assumed it was like some little retreat where like everybody's living in a hut.
And all this to say, I think that's the image he wants to portray.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, like him not disclosing his finances goes right in line with that. But who knows if that was the real reason he didn't want to run anymore or he wanted to drop out. I think it's just because he was like, I don't really fucking want this. It's and it's like time to jump ship. So yeah, I think that's basically, he associated that with Donald as well in 2016. He was probably thinking, Donald probably had no intention of even winning in the polls, let alone becoming president. And then once he started doing it, the change in the thing is, I think they both have big egos, but Howard's very much aware of his ego. Donald is not. Donald has a huge ego, but like I don't think he's very self-reflective. So I think Donald kind of ate that up a little more than Howard did and kind of got into it. Because I do believe Howard, whenever he said that, I think that Donald didn't really want to become president. He had a good life. I kind of subscribe to that too.
Yeah, I mean, then there's stories about how, and we're trying, at least myself, I'm not going to try to put like my political views into the show because God knows that's worthless.
Right.
But there's rumors that Trump wanted to start his own news network, kind of like a Fox News, and that, he's kicking up all these Twitter wars with Obama while Obama was in office, and even though he kind of started out as a Democrat, he started to really associate himself with the Republican Party later on.
Right.
Constantly going after Obama, but a lot of people think that was just to raise awareness for him. I mean, God knows he's the best advertiser for himself.
Sure.
And that he was going to launch a news network, conservative news network after the election.
I didn't know that, but
because he's also, sorry to cut you off, but he's also announced that he's going to run for president for the past 10 elections, and normally it's because he has a new book out or he's promoting something or The Apprentice.
When did he say he was going to do the news network? Just prior to running?
This is like a rumored thing that that's why he was really riding the momentum of this election, that if he would have lost to Hillary, he has all this backing and everyone loves him in the Republican Party, so then he launches a Fox News competitor.
Yeah, Trump's always been kind of political, even in interviews, and especially whenever he started becoming on Howard in the early 90s. You can read that, some of the excerpts from the book. Most of it's pretty raunchy about, women and who Donald's dating and this, social elite, the, company that he runs with and stuff like that. But they do touch on politics a lot because Donald's very opinionated on a lot of things, but politics being one of them, coming, as a wealthy businessman. So, obviously he has his opinions on that. So they get into that a lot. But I've always found it interesting that all through the 90s, even into the early 2000s, pretty much all pre-Obama, all of Donald's political views fall right in line with the Democratic Party. He was a huge Hillary supporter, not a Hillary supporter. He was a Clinton supporter during Bill's presidency.
He was friends with the Clintons.
He was friends with the Clintons.
Went to Chelsea's wedding.
He was friends with Bloomberg, who was Democrat. He ran with the Democratic circles, and there's a couple quotes that I read that are actually in the book. And one of the things Donald said, and this is probably one of the interviews from early 2000s, maybe. He goes, because Howard asked him, a lot of people think that businessmen don't do as well under a Democratic president or a Democratic House and Congress. And he asked if that was the case for him whenever Bill Clinton was president. And he said, it's a funny thing because Republicans are known for business, and yet the economy always tanks under Republicans. So it's like he has all these little quotes like that, that kind of damage, the Republican Party. And now to become so far the other way always just fascinated me, like how people don't care about that. Like, why doesn't nobody care about that? And he's like, I always wondered, why not? If you were running against Donald Trump, bring up those, instead of bringing up all the stuff he said about women on the Howard Stern show, bring up some of the stuff he actually said about politics on the Stern show and use that against, you know what I mean? Why wouldn't that ever come up? and never did. And it was always just about some of the raunchy stuff he said.
Mm-hmm. And he was quoted on the Stern Show saying before George W. got elected that he told Howard, if W gets elected, you better watch out because your money's going to go. Like being in that tax bracket.
Right. So, I mean, he was very aware, and it would be one thing if Donald got into, the White House and became more of a middle, like somewhere in the middle, but he's not. It seems like he's right. Everything is right in line with, Republican views and just playing to that base and staying like on the right side of things. Mm-hmm. Most of it,
And I think Howard's even commented about, does he believe this, or is he just reading the poll numbers and saying the opinion that's going to get him elected?
Howard comments that and goes as far to say, he's like, I don't believe Donald actually believes this stuff, especially if it's shit about abortion. How many abortions that guy probably had paid for women? Do you honestly believe that guy really is against? Like, there's not a chance in hell that guy really has a stake in the abortion debate.
Absolutely not.
It's insane to me. And then, so I don't know. The fact that the people on that, clearly, if you haven't told me, Dan and I are more left leaning than not, but probably would say we're more in the middle than if you're living in Los Angeles. Just
amongst the snowflakes out here.
Right. If you're not ready to stab Donald Trump in the heart, you're basically the devil yourself. So, so we're kind of in the middle in that sense because we come, we're both from Pennsylvania, where it's now leaning more right than anything. So, so it's I try to look at both sides, but I just always found it fascinating that people don't look at those Howard Stern interviews and pull clips and pull things that Donald said about Republicans, to his detriment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's talk about Trump's appearances on the Stern Show. This actually blew me away in doing some research. I counted roughly 31 appearances between calls in studio.
Oh, holy shit.
31 times he's been on the show.
Damn.
Total. So
15.
Right. Tons of content.
Right.
And each time is 50 minutes, an hour, hour and a half.
Right.
So these aren't, some of his call-ins were relatively brief, but even then, and like you spoke about, he's always been a little bit political because reading over these call notes, every other topic is like his opinions on Mark Cuban, his opinions on George W. Bush, his opinions on the Iraq War.
Right.
Which is funny because I saw that on the Trump show, on the Stern show. I know.
Well, when Trump's on,
that's our country right now.
It becomes the Trump show.
That's Fox News. But when he came on the Stern Show, speaking of actually putting him to task on real things he said, he actually admitted that he would have backed the Iraq War on the Stern Show, which is something that during his election campaign, he was adamantly that he never supported the war. He never would have. That was a stupid choice from day one. And it was right there on recording that he said, I probably would have if I was in that choice on the Stern Show. And he totally took it back during the election.
CNN played that, and then it was kind of just glossed over. I remember seeing that because I saw that too. And CNN played that little clip and in quotes had it on there. Nobody seems to give a shit about anything anymore.
This guy, he's Teflon Don.
Yeah, nobody seems to care.
This guy
about
can murder someone in Times Square.
He said it.
He get reelected. Yeah, exactly.
I could shoot somebody. So, whenever you get away with as much stuff as he has, why not think that? Of course you can.
Sure.
So, you can say whatever the hell you want and go back on it a couple years later and no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
So
perfect politician.
Yeah, that's true.
So his first call into the show was January 11th, 1993. So I'll do some Howard math where it takes him 45 minutes to figure out a simple, which that's probably bullshit, right? He's not that dumb.
I am. So if he's thinking like me.
Well, it's 2020, so it's pretty damn easy this year. So 20 plus 7, 27 years ago, he's been on the show.
I'm
a genius.
Yeah, that would have taken me 10 minutes.
So, 27 years. His last call was on... I'm sorry, it wasn't total 27 because his last call was on August 25th, 2015. So actually, as he was in the middle of election season, he called in the show. And I remember even at the time, it was like, is this really Donald? Because they started having the impersonator on more and more.
Right.
Because if you'll remember, he was still a huge story even during the Republican primary.
Sure.
Like he was the only thing people talked about.
Right,
This
right.
guy's really
He
mixing
was
it
just-
up, and he's shooting from the hip, and this guy's cool. So
At the time,
was-
I was like, maybe this guy will actually come in here and mix it up. I remember thinking that too. I was like, but nah.
I feel like half of the people have like turned this thing off already because they're like, these fucking snowflakes in LA.
Yeah, whatever. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, fuck them. There's like 7 people listening anyways. but yeah, he even kind of cut himself off from the show, I think, in 2015 because I'm sure he had advisors of, hey, we know you like going on the show and speaking your mind, but you may want to start pulling that back a little bit. So now I'll redo my math here, 15 plus 7. So let's go with 22 years he was on the show. So 31 appearances in 22 years. He's a big part of the show.
That's got to be the most, right? I mean,
It's up there.
If it's not the most, yeah, it's definitely up there. And Howard's always gone to say that Donald is one of his best guests. Like he's always been on, and that's one thing. I mean, Donald's been Donald since that interview in '93 up until
you can listen
now.
to an interview from him in the 80s and you think it was recorded yesterday.
Yeah, he's
It's
been the
frightening.
same guy, and it's like, and before he was president, it's super entertaining. Like he's funny. He's like,
Sure.
he's hilarious. So him on these shows, I remember like whenever he would be on, like, and Howard asked him any question, he would answer anything, like answer it honestly.
Which Howard always refers to as like his favorite
That's his
part.
favorite. Right? If you're a guest that is open and honest, you're a good guest in Howard's eyes, and in the audience's eyes as well. So Donald was always just a great guest, but he's always been Donald. You know what I mean? So like, it's just I don't know. I've always appreciated Donald for that, at least. Like he's just always been himself, and he's always been honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Howard still refers, still
honest
blows
too.
Howard's
Yeah.
to a degree. But Howard always refers to the fact, it still blows his mind till today that I can't believe Trump went on here and he said the real tens, they're not actresses, they're hairdressers
Right.
and waitresses. That still blows his mind that Trump said that like 25 years ago.
Right, I know. Like that was the one thing he
blew,
pulled.
like,
You know why I like
revolutionary
Donald? Here's
thought.
why. He's like, he always breaks it down like he's going to say something new, but it's the same thing. He's like,
Same
you know why I like Donald? Here's why. I'd ask Donald, hey, Angelina Jolie, what do you think? Is she a 10?
Called her a 7. Can you believe it?
She's a 7. Now, can you believe that? Every time it's that same story.
It's actually not the actresses that are the hottest.
Right. That was
It's
the
the
craziest
stewardess.
thing. Yeah, that's Howard. That's Donald being the most insane radio guest ever. It's just saying those things.
Another thing that blew his mind is that a woman can't be. Well, this is what Trump said: a woman can't be a 10 if she's flat chested, and
Right.
that was like brilliant in Howard's mind. He still references that.
Meanwhile,
every week.
Yeah, like Howard's saying 10 at this point in his Howard's career. Howard's saying every outlandish and crazy thing you could possibly think of, and then for that to really strike a chord with Howard, that Trump said that. You know what I mean? That's nothing compared to what he used to say.
Mind is blown.
So, but I don't know. As far as like Trump's politics, leading up there and how they've changed, Howard's have seemed to fall in line with Donald's Trump politics. Leading up to until like Donald actually got into politics. You know what I mean? Whenever Donald would talk about his views on stuff, and then it's just because they kind of fell more in line with a Democratic viewpoint, which is what Howard is. But Howard always seemed to have like just a common sense approach, and Donald seemed to kind of have that as well, like everything leading up to the actual election. So I feel like they kind of agreed on most things political up until Donald started running, which kind of blows my mind too.
I know, it's so funny we talk about how these topics that get brought up. I'm looking at all the call notes and his guest appearances. January 13th, 1997. So 23 years ago.
Dude, you're good.
And
That's insane.
mathematician, I tell you. But tell me these topics aren't still relevant. Trump stops by the Howard Stern birthday celebration, talks about his relationship with his ex-wife Ivana. Wow, who knows? Whatever their names are. His wedding to Marla Mabel, and walks back a claim that he won $20 million betting against Mike Tyson, and discusses his friendship with O.J. Simpson. This is 23 years ago, and this could be a call that happened yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
And the same. I made another note on a similar call, and again, this is from. Let me find it here. This is great air, dead air here. Okay, September 23rd, 2004. Stern and Trump discuss their mutual disdain for the Iraq War, George W. Bush, The Apprentice, Mark Cuban, prenups, his friendships with Melania, his daughter's love life, and New England Patriot Tom Brady.
That's
That
the one
was
that's in the
16
book.
years ago.
Yeah, that was one in the book. Yeah, that's crazy to me. And he did have a little feud with Mark Cuban because Mark Cuban was saying that.
Not did. He still does to this
does,
day.
Sure. But even back then, it was just basically over Mark Cuban saying that he's not as rich as people think he is.
Yeah.
And he's not a billionaire. And then that just fucking, you know.
Oh, I'm sure that Mark
a fire.
Cuban drives him nuts.
Oh, my God.
Well, Cuban's totally self-made. Trump's not.
Right.
You know, I don't know his exact numbers. I'd imagine he's been a more successful entrepreneur when you look
Right.
at a lot of the failures of Trump Casino, Trump University.
Sure. That's what, in that same call, he talks about Mark Cuban called Trump out because he's saying that Trump University is a failure and that, something else. Was it, what did you say? The casino? Not the casino.
Yeah, it was in Atlantic City, his big failed casino. I forget the exact
It
details.
was Trump University and Trump Water. He had Trump Water too, and Mark Cuban called him out saying that those two things are failures, and he's sitting there defending them. And we clearly know now that Trump Water and Trump University did not stand the test of time. So I think Cubes had a point there, but you can see then Trump goes off for 5-10 minutes about defending it, blasting Mark Cuban. He can't stand any criticism, and not to say that that's any different than what it is now. But yeah, it was just funny to see those in that call from 16 years ago, and it still holds up.
Still holds up. Like Gary's Desert Island tapes.
It still holds up.
And for stat correction, it was the Trump Taj Mahal was the huge failure in Atlantic City.
Jesus.
Which I'm sure Mark Cuban has failed
course,
investments too. Everybody does, but to
Yeah.
that grand of a stage, and
Right.
he didn't come from money, so I'm sure and I'm sure Cuban being on TV, being shown being a billionaire, shown successful, that's his area.
Right.
He's the Apprentice guy.
Right. Oh yeah, Apprentice was huge. I mean, that was probably the height of Trump's
got him
popularity.
elected.
Yeah, got him elected. That was the
Put
height of
an
his
image in
popularity.
in America's head that he's a successful businessman.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The one thing that I actually remember, this doesn't really have to do with politics, or Howard even, but I just remember the feud with Rosie O'Donnell that Trump had. Remember he had those interviews.
You call her like a pig nose or something.
Yeah. He said, well, Rosie's disgusting. She's a pig. I'm like, oh my God. I remember thinking, because I was, what were we, 18, 19? I remember thinking that was funny back then. Because I was like, who's this guy? This guy's outrageous. Who the fuck says this in public about another famous person? You know what I mean? Who does this? And I just remember, I remember E-Bombs World when we were in college. I remember all those.
For those of you that don't know, that was kind of the original viral video, before YouTube.
Pre-YouTube, this is where you have to go find all your funny internet videos. Right. But this was I remember those were all the videos on E-Bombs World. It was looking at Trump blasting Rosie O'Donnell, and I remember thinking, I was like, this guy's fucking wild. This guy is crazy. Who does this? Who says this shit? And I remember, I just remember that being now looking back, I was like, I don't know. A fucking douche. It's kind of a bullet thing to do, but at the time I thought it was hilarious. But I was like, man, that's fucking crazy. So, but Trump's been that same guy.
Yeah, and I think that's his appeal, and I guess that's Howard's appeal too. Is people like that? I think people got sick of the canned responses, robotic answers. You know what they're going to say before they say it,
right?
And it was like a breath of fresh air. Howard being on the radio as being one of the first people that just kind of started speaking their mind, freestyling, and now Trump in politics definitely took that to a whole different level.
Right. They went hand in hand in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of similarities between the two and how they speak publicly.
Trump's like the shock jock of Washington, D.C.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But Trump, again, and that's probably the reason he got elected, because people view him in that Howard Stern-esque type mindset. This guy's an original. He's going to speak his mind. He doesn't pull any punches. He's going to tell it like it is. Mm-hmm. That's exactly why he got elected.
And coming off Obama, who was the most polished president we've ever had.
Just as far as just a politician, to a T. And that's probably what turned people off a lot about Hillary is she's that same robotic.
It was going to be 8 more years of that, or 4 more years or whatever.
So I get it, but and I get the appeal. That's why we love Howard, why we fell in love with Howard, is that same reason. So not to say I just thought not to throw in our own political views on it. I just thought that was more to get elected. But why would I think that? Because Donald's been the same way forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the more we look at the notes, like I said, you could look at these call notes from 93, 97, 2001, and they could be recorded yesterday. The topics are still Iraq war.
Right.
He's beefing with other politicians. Let's rate the women. It's like there's some themes that we see emerging here in these interviews.
Exactly. With all those conversations, and especially Trump talking a lot about politics in those, do you think that Howard would have ever guessed that Donald would run? Or, I mean, do you think Donald even knew that he might run someday?
Yeah, I mean, he's announced that he's going to run when he's promoting a book, and even this show note that I see right here in front of me, November 9th, 1999, Stern jokingly calls Trump Mr. President and plays Hail to the Chief, and they discuss his 2000 presidential candidacy.
Holy shit.
Yeah, right. 20 years ago.
Exactly.
This is still the topic. But if you'll remember, even in the primaries, people were just kind of like, yeah, he has I mean, shit, even the day of the election, no one thought he was going to get elected.
Right.
So I think it just kind of shocked everybody.
Started happening. And yeah, I wonder, I'm just, because I know there was it was almost every election, Donald teased that he might run, but he was selling something. I get it. But I just wonder if there was in the back of his mind, someday I'm actually going to run. In the back of Donald's mind. Yeah.
And I think with his case too, it's a lot of smart people that are reading the polls, reading the pulse of the country. And I don't think it's old Donald sitting there thinking of all of these strategies. Well, that's any politician. They have a team behind them. But I think that he saw the opportunity of people are really down on Obama, and the Republican field was weak.
Right.
And there was now it's kind of, we see that with the Democrats in 2020, but they'd have a Republican debate and there'd be 15 candidates.
Right.
So you didn't really know the other 14, but you knew Donald Trump.
Right.
So, his Q rating or whatever, his fame was way, and originally he said, I'm not going to take donor money to our campaign. I think he's still stuck with that. I'm not sure. But so that was kind of him separating himself. Right. So maybe it was kind of as the momentum started building, he maybe talked himself into this. So if I could actually do this thing.
Right.
And I think he's so used to bashing Obama about, I would do this better, I would do that better, that he's like, here's my chance to show it.
Right. Exactly. And that's basically been his platform for the first 4 years was, I'm going to reverse every single thing that guy ever did.
So let's switch gears and go over to the other side of the political race. Some people think the other Antichrist involved in American politics, Hillary Clinton, who was recently on the Stern Show in late 2019. And Howard, even when he was on his press tour, made it a point to talk about he wished Hillary would have came in. He really thinks that it would have helped her win the election of showing that more personable side, that getting away from those robotic canned responses. And, and she gave an awesome interview that maybe would have shed light on her not being such a robot.
Right. Yeah,
so how'd you feel about the Hillary interview?
It was good. You can tell that Howard was obviously super prepared. He compared this this was his Moby Dick. He's wanted this interview. Yeah, actually, he talked about this a little bit in the book, how he hasn't wanted an interview like this since Michael Jackson was the interview that kind of escaped him. And he talks about it a little bit in the book. Back in '94, they got as far as him and Don Buchwald, his agent, met with Michael in a hotel room. And he said it was really weird. His makeup was running off his face, and it was they were so nervous. It was right after the child molestation accusations came out. So he was pretty much going to say I want to do a serious interview. I'm not going to touch on that. I'll do whatever. But I was reading this earlier, and I was I couldn't help but think the 1994 Howard interviewing Michael Jackson in a serious way does not seem feasible at all.
No.
Right? There's no way. I mean, obviously it never happened, so maybe he got tipped off, but Howard claims that I really want to do a serious interview with him, because the only time he ever really did a serious interview like that at that time was whenever he interviewed Maharishi, the TM guy, Maharishi Yogi, because he did it for his mom and they did it off air, on a TV show. But other than that, all of his interviews back then were pretty much fucking attacks. And
that's a great point, because he still talks about some of his biggest regrets being when Robin Williams was on the show,
right?
Kept asking about a nanny that he was supposed to be having an affair with, and just going places that totally caught Robin off guard, Robin Williams. And Howard's learned his lessons through that, and knows better.
Right.
And he knows to go places that other interviews won't, but with a little bit more delicacy,
Sure.
a little bit.
I thought he would have established himself enough by 2016, after, let's see. He started doing decent, good interviews. I mean, the early 2000s, even he kind of got away from the whole shticky, type of interview where he's going to try to get a kind of a gotcha interview. And I mean, there was still, not to say that his interviews were bad back then, but they were just different. There wasn't insightful, but
Yeah, he's more of a shock jock.
sure. And I thought that he would have established himself enough by 2016 as a good interview and actually do an honest and open interview with somebody who's not ask questions that people want to hear, not necessarily just try to make them uncomfortable. I thought Hillary's team would have probably caught on to that and realized that, but never did.
Here's my opinion, though. I'll ask your opinion. I think that Hillary thought that she had it such in the bag that she didn't have to do that. She didn't have to step out of her comfort zone. But I think, obviously, hindsight 2020, or if, let's say that she ran this next campaign, I know she's not, but
Right.
I think she would be way more open to that because, hey, this is a 50-50 election. I need every vote I can get. Whereas the Democratic Party, Hillary, they all just kind of treated it as she was going to just walk into the office.
Right. She comments on that a little bit in their interview that they had last year, but basically saying, I mean, not in these words, but she was a little overconfident. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
An overconfident, just like you said, not having to do those types of things and go to those towns and reach those types of people. But here's what's interesting is the actual math on it is obviously she only lost by a couple thousand votes or whatever it was, and a lot of those states were PA, Ohio, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, and I can't help to think that if she did happen to do the interview, during before the election, that and Howard obviously says this too, that it would have reached those types of people in those areas and maybe had an effect. And since we're not talking about large numbers, I'm not saying that if Howard did this interview, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of voters would have changed their mind on Hillary Clinton. I don't believe that. But if it was as close as the polls say, and it did come down to those states where I'm sure Howard has a pretty big audience, it's interesting to think that it probably could have helped push her in that direction.
Yeah. And it's funny, they say between all the debates that happened around the dinner table and half of America wants to kill the other half of America, it really only comes down to 4 or 5 states. Yeah. And even then, those states are mostly decided, and it comes down to a couple million swing votes throughout the whole country, or a couple 100,000 swing votes.
Right.
So I think you're onto something there. And plus, the Stern Show, it gets picked up on so many. When someone's on there and breaks news, it's instantly everywhere.
Right.
So I think they could have had a couple good quotes that made her a little bit more humanized.
Right.
And she probably would have said a couple things that weren't seen as the greatest by by her side. But I guess that's a give and take of being on a show like that. You kind of take the good with the bad. And that's part of humanizing yourself.
Right.
Not everything's going to come out perfect.
And that's all he wanted to do to her. He wasn't going to ask her about Monica Lewinsky. He wasn't really asking about her politics as much because that's not Howard's platform. He's not there to really drill her on Benghazi and all of her politics and the things that she will get drilled about in debates and things like that. He just wanted to humanize her, ask her basic questions because again, we talk about politicians are so calculated and so robotic in their answers whenever you see them on...
Especially her.
And that was her downfall, I think, with a lot of people that were... Because, the whole lesser of two evils was the quote of that election. You know what I mean? Lesser of two evils. And so I think humanizing Hillary to that point for those people that actually felt that way, if it's lesser of two evils, maybe could have... Those are the people I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I don't think if people that we know are Republican through and through, they're not going to change their mind. I don't think that interview would be something that would change their mind.
And one thing I will give Howard credit for is he's never wavered from his support for Hillary. Even during the election, he said, I'm friends with Donald. I loved him as a guest. But he was even supporting Hillary when she ran against Obama 4 years or 8 years before that. And it's interesting that he can kind of be a fan of both at the same time. He loves Donald as a guest. He's friends with him. I think Donald maybe went to his wedding with Beth, or maybe he went to one of Donald's.
He went to Donald's wedding. Or they're both, or vice. I
think both. Yeah. So obviously friends. He's been on the show for 20 plus years, but then also he separates that into, but I think that this would be the better presidential candidate, which
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just pick who they like as a person.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. He actually looked at the politics and his reasoning behind it is so common sense to me. And given, I'm not saying that like he believes that Hillary would have been a great president, and he might be right, but who knows at this point. I'm just saying what he appreciated about Hillary was something I think was very, just common sense to me, which is like she was a lifelong politician in the sense that she dedicated her life to public service. And that's something that could be, you can look down on that because you kind of get twisted up in the whole political bullshit of it all. But it's also someone that literally dedicated their life to serving the public and serving the country, or their state or whatever it may be. So regardless if you agree with things that she did or disagreed, you can at least admire the fact that she's dedicated her life to that sort of thing. And I think that's something that Howard really appreciated, and he kind of hit that home, while she was on.
Yeah, I think he looked at it as hiring a job candidate or something.
Yeah,
Put their
exactly.
resumes together, and what do you get?
And it seems like common sense. Now, I get it. When we talk about politics, it's never that easy, and it's never that black and white. Because you might not agree with her. It's an opinion, so you might not agree with her resume. But there is something to say for her, at least, having a resume to go off of, and Howard had appreciated that.
Yeah, and I think that Howard, even though, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to think about because I think Howard would naturally have a little bit of a liberal audience since it's comedic and he's kind of cutting loose on a lot of things.
Right.
But at the same time, he has a lot of truck drivers and blue-collar guys that hate Hillary. And even there was some callers, they may even staged how many callers called in. You could speak towards that.
I hated this because, I know this kind of is countering what I just said earlier about how it could have swayed a lot of people, but the way that these callers called in after this Hillary interview just seems so scripted. Caller from let's say a call from Mike from Michigan. Hey, I got to tell you, I never really cared for Hillary Clinton. I always thought that she was just a robot. But after that interview, man, I don't know. I probably would have voted for her. I'm like, Jesus, like, what? And that happened like 5 or 6 more times. Like, they just kept picking up the call. I was like, who the fuck is that? Fred? Like, who's calling in right now?
Yeah, that call screener was really. They knew what they were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I'm glad Ralph actually called up afterwards. He's like, "Who the fuck is saying they're going to change their mind after one interview? Like, you could have picked up a book and figure out who Hillary was if you really cared enough." But I just thought that was interesting, or it's stupid. But I do think that there's at least a few people out there that, not to say like they would be that dramatic to be like, "Oh, I hated her before, but now I love her." But I do think there's people on the fence at the time of the election that would have changed their mind if they would have heard that interview prior.
Yeah, it's very true because part of Trump's appeal that we've mentioned before is that speaking your mind, not having all these canned responses. So that kind of would have put her more appealing towards the people that voted for Trump because of those reasons.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I just found it fascinating that Howard, you could tell Howard wanted Hillary as a guest almost more than any other. He says it more than any other guest. And he's done interviews with everybody, anybody you could think of. And he really wanted her. And I think that not shows you how much Howard loves Hillary, but it shows how much he actually cares about politics, even though he won't say that he cares about politics as much because he's a comedy show. He doesn't want to. He can say that he says he's in the middle. He's like, I have people were pissed off at me on the Republican side. People were pissed off at me on the Democratic side. He always says that everybody's mad at him, but it's clear he's left leaning, and he probably is more strong opinionated about politics than he lets on a show. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, because I think he goes beyond just the presidency. He talks about who's running for New York mayor, and who's running for his local elections, and he knows the issues.
Yeah,
he knows about the water supply each time you flush your toilet in New York. Right. He's all versed on all the, and he's well read. He reads the newspaper before each show and just kind of keeps himself involved with current events.
Do you think that it's a calculated thing, or do you think he's still just being honest with himself? Because there are some things that he obviously agrees with Trump on, and same with you and me. We're not saying here but
I feel like can't we all just go back to agreeing with a little bit of each?
No, we're too far gone.
Never.
It sucks now. I hate it.
It's impossible in our society to say they kind of both have
That
good
would
points.
make too much sense to just to make it that easy, you know. Like no, it's got to be one way or another nowadays, and it's very
And
frustrating.
I feel like we both kind of feel that way, and I think Howard does too.
Right.
And it comes through with, yeah, I want Hillary, but hey, Donald's got some good points, and
I've made. We have a lot of friends on like the right leaning. I don't know how do you call it? Just Republicans, I guess.
Sure.
We have like a lot of Republican
Conservatives.
friends. Conservatives. That's what I'm looking for. So we have a lot of conservative friends, and I'll usually the friends that don't really listen to the Stern Show, like I'll send them some clips about like Howard's take on politics or takes on certain topics and issues, and sometimes they're more liberal, sometimes they're more conservative, but they always seem to. It's that for whatever reason. Whenever Howard has an opinion on something, it resonates with people in a way that doesn't seem polarizing in one way or another. Does that make sense? Like Howard has a way of kind of like bringing, like I keep saying, common sense to a topic or an issue, and it seems like to get people on the same page. Like my mom is very liberal. My dad is very conservative. Very fun household. But I could show them both a clip from Howard Stern where he's kind of taking a side on either one, but like it doesn't. My dad wouldn't turn up his nose or anything if it sounded liberal. My mom wouldn't turn up her nose if it sounded conservative. You know what I mean? So Howard has a way about him with politics and talking about issues and talking about politics that I think I wonder if he understands how influential he can be if he wanted to be in politics. What do you think?
yeah, well, I think he's starting to grasp that more and more, or that it's actually coming true of what he wanted, because we've talked about on this show before about how the Stern Show has, by and large, regress back to more conservative than it was. Definitely more conservative than in the 90s
Right.
and in the early 2000s. But
Conservative
maybe,
in the sense of it's not as outlandish, not like
they're not putting strippers in clown makeup and throwing
throwing
baloney on their
yeah.
ass.
Exactly.
I mean, they do like once a year now
Right.
instead of once a week.
Right.
But I think that was all part of this calculation to move towards that type of show. And the question that I was going to ask you is, we still have like 11 months until the 2020 election. Are we going to start to see some of these candidates on the Stern Show?
And going with what we were just talking about, I hope so, because if he understands that he does have, he does have an influence clearly on politics and on people's views on politics and issues. So if he did have politicians on, he knows now that he can actually sway. And I think that he understands it, but he doesn't want to get into that arena where he and he says this before, but like I'm just kind of elaborate on it, that he doesn't want to have one on because then he has to have the other side, or then people are going to polarize him in one way, and he doesn't want to get into that whole thing where he now becomes the political show. But it is interesting, like, that he's choosing to do that, because he does. I don't know if he knows this or not, but I'm sure he does. That if he does have somebody on, it could have a huge, massive effect on the election or that candidate. So, do I think that he will? Yeah, I do. I think that might get the best of him. I think that the fact that he has that power he might use it. I think he will use it. I think we might see another candidate on, or two or three, in the next year or so. And to say that he is going to have three guests that are in the running for president on is not that much, considering how much press those other candidates are going to be.
Yeah, especially during the primaries, where there's like
They're
20
everywhere. Yeah.
Democrats running.
So to answer your question, yeah, I do think that he will use that influence, and if he doesn't, I think he should. Because who else has that kind of reach?
This has been one of his goals, is to get these A-listers, and during a political season, God knows that's all anyone talks about.
Right.
So be top of mind, maybe get some new listeners, get picked up by billion news outlets for whatever quotes come out of the interview.
Right.
So definitely would be raising awareness back to the show for
Sure.
a lot of people probably tailed off, and some people probably don't even know he's still on the radio.
Yeah, people don't. I know.
I mean,
funny.
it's such a paid subscriber. They don't really run ads. So it is kind of easy to forget, unless you're
in the know
psychos like us that make a podcast about them every week. It's kind of easy to lose that. But if a politician goes on there and breaks a couple quotes, breaks some headlines, it picks up everywhere.
Right.
And I think modern day politics is regressing back towards being more. And it's probably because Trump got elected, but now we see. Well, actually, this is this was during the 2016 election. Obama went on Mark Maron's podcast.
Yes.
And then 6 months or so ago, Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Right.
So I think these politicians are realizing, oh, this is actually where people go to hear some real shit.
Right.
They don't want to just hear 30-second perfect news clips all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the debates obviously tackle the issues, which is by far the most important thing. But as we both know, a lot of people don't vote on that. They vote on personality and who they like.
Sure. I mean, it's like looking presidential used to count for half of the elections.
I know. So you're right. Going on these podcasts and going on something like the Howard Stern show is something that these, I'm sure, and Howard, I think he mentioned this, that they've been reached out to by, campaign managers from, did he say who? He didn't say. I remember Robin was like, who? And then he didn't say.
No, I don't think.
He didn't say actually what politicians, asked to come on the show, but he's had opportunities to have people on. I do think he's going to wait a little bit and wait till the Democratic Party dwindles down to their actual, top candidates. And then I'll have some people on. And I hope he does it for the other side, too. I hope he has some Republican candidates on if they ever pop up.
Well, not candidates, but
Well, sure.
That's kind of what I was thinking, too, to even it out. Trump's probably not going to go back on for how much those quotes got picked up.
Was somebody going to run against Trump for the primary?
Unless he gets impeached.
Yeah.
then I guess it's back to 50-50.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to put another. I think he's going to win his own ticket.
Yeah.
They're not going to unseat a sitting president for their own party.
Right.
But who knows these days?
That's what I'm saying. It's like the WWE out there, man. Yeah, somebody else.
Hey, this is a former
Ultimate Warrior comes
WWE
running down the aisle. Next thing you know,
King
he's
Kong Bundy shows up at Capitol
like the
Hill.
Royal Rumble. All of a sudden, every new guy runs in every 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, we're laughing, but Trump was on the WWE like multiple times.
Yeah.
Didn't he face Vince McMahon in like WrestleMania?
Did he shave his head?
Yeah, hair cutting
It
match.
was a hair cutting match. Whoever lost had to shave the other person's head, and he's on there. Vince McMahon's screaming, ah!
And I think he put Vince McMahon's.
If you do nothing else, look up that clip of Donald Trump shaving Vince McMahon's head, and for some reason, Vince McMahon's screaming at the top of his lungs like he's slitting his throat. It's the funniest thing you'll ever see.
And Trump put Linda McMahon as one of his chairs.
He did. Yeah,
like
she resigned
head of
recently.
education or something.
Yeah. She was there. She was in the position for a minute, and she just resigned like last year. But yeah, it definitely is like the WWE.
So, do you think Donald Trump would ever come back on the show or even call in? Because we know he's not exactly shy about speaking his mind, but he may have advisors. I think he's called into like Fox and Friends and stuff, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But then again, ever since he's become president, he's not. He likes to do his own
He's got Twitter
control.
No,
exactly. He doesn't do a lot of White House press conferences like ever. I don't think
he doesn't have to. I mean, he's literally speaking his mind every 15 minutes. So it's
right.
You know what I mean. So
he just wants to talk to his base.
Yeah, he doesn't have to have an outlet anymore. But
the election season, he may be getting advised of, hey, our base isn't big enough for the win. We need a couple undecided voters.
Sure. What's funny? And then here's where it gets interesting. So Trump would only want to go on the Stern show if that got those voters. I mean, that's why he wouldn't do it any other reason at this point, I don't think. And do you think Howard would give him that type of interview? You know what I mean? So Trump would be probably going in there thinking that he's going to go in there to get these votes, but I don't think Howard would get in there and give him some fluffy type of interview at this point.
No, I don't think fluffy, but I don't think it would be. He may touch on, oh my God, can you believe that you don't think flat-chested women are 10s?
Right.
And that the hottest chicks are waitresses in L.A.? I think that it would be mainly pretty serious. It'd be similar to the Hillary interview where they didn't dive too much into the Monica Lewinsky and he kept it somewhat
or even
PC.
Politics that much,
Right.
It was basically just about the person, which they've done that with Trump a lot. But
I think he just wants to ask him kind of what we're talking about of, did you even see this coming? Is this, could you have predicted this? That's what I think it would be.
How do you feel about all this hate that you're getting? Because you never really had that before, so now you have all these people hating you. You know what I mean? So those are the kind of questions I would actually. I'd be fascinated to, but I don't know if Trump would give honest answers if he's going to be, if he's still trying to be.
Now he's politician Donald.
Here's where I can see Donald coming back is say he loses. I can see him coming back and kind of doing like a tell-all to Howard. I mean, because he's writing another book.
Well, he's writing another book.
Right.
Like I mentioned, he probably still will launch that news network whenever he's out of the office, because God knows he's got his followers now.
Right. Now he has a huge base.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
he's like the conservative god now.
Right.
So maybe.
Yeah, I could see him coming back on in that sense. I can't. You're right. I can't see him coming back on prior or while he's still in the political arena. I think that, it would be like an afterwards. And I hope that
then again, what's he going to say that's really going to affect him? I mean, if he could say the shit that got leaked from grab him by the pussy and all that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you get much lower than that and you still get elected?
Yeah. Nobody gives a shit anymore. But it would. I'd be fascinated to hear him once he's out talking about his experience in there and kind of just I don't know, wishful thinking, being a little more humble interview as far as introspective, retrospective about looking about his time there, all the stress he had, and then kind of just recounting the experience. But I don't know if he'll ever show back up on the Howard Stern show.
Probably not. Well, who knows if Howard's even going to have a show by the time he does his stuff. Yeah.
Howard Stern podcast will get kicked off all podcast networks if he starts his own podcast.
Oh yeah, I could see him doing a Netflix interview show or something.
Like Letterman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Just interviews.
Right.
Because I don't even think he gets too much into I like the staff stuff and all that the most, but I think anymore he's 90% focused on his interviews.
Sure. Yeah. I think they're kind of running out of staff stuff.
Well, the staff's fucking lame, dude.
Yeah.
No one challenges them. There's no conflict.
Yeah,
Everyone it's a bunch of yes men.
Right.
Let's do a whole episode on that.
Yep.
That's one of my ideas.
Damn, we did a whole political discussion for two guys that really don't discuss politics much.
Yeah, I don't know anything about politics.
No, me either. I'm an idiot. So
I hope none of you took anything we just said serious.
Yeah, you could be elected president now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This podcast gets big enough. Watch out. Next election season.
But let's wrap this up. Yeah, man. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Keep on coming back. We plan on about once every 2 weeks we'll have a new episode for you. We got sponsors now, so we're making 17 cents total.
Woo! Love that money.
Just swimming in cash.
But
that's going to wrap it up here from Los Angeles. It's been a good time there, Tyler.
Yeah.
Let's hope World War III doesn't hit before we can take over the podcast world.
We'll do our next podcast from the bunkers as we're taking on grenades. But until next time, I'm Tyler Quartet.
I'm Daniel Coyne.
See ya later. Hey now.
Bye for now.